Elena stood in the grand entrance of her mansion, watching the fifth maid run out the front door in 6 months. The woman didn't even stop to collect her final paycheck. She just ran, her shoes clicking fast on a marble floor, her face white as snow, her hands shaking like leaves of storm. "Wait!" Elena called out. "Please, tell me what happened." But the maid was already gone. The massive wooden door slammed shut behind her with a boom that echoed through the empty halls. Elena stood there alone, surrounded by golden chandeliers, silk curtains, and furniture that cost more than most people's houses. Everything sparkled, everything shined, but somehow the mansion felt cold, dark, wrong. Another one? Richard's voice came from the staircase. Elena's husband walked down slowly, a coffee cup in his hand, a smile on his face. He was handsome, always dressed perfectly, always calm. "Darling, you really need to stop hiring these dramatic women." Dramatic? Elena turned to him, her heart pounding. "Richard, that's 5 maids in 6 months. 5. They all leave the same way." Terrified, running, refusing to explain. Richard laughed and sipped his coffee. "They're probably just lazy. They see how big this house is and decide it's too much work. You're overthinking it, Elena." But Elena wasn't overthinking it. She knew something was wrong. She had felt it for months now. A coldness in certain rooms, a feeling of being watched, sounds that shouldn't exist. It started small. Doors would open on their own. She would close the nursery door at night, and by morning it would be wide open. At first, she blamed the wind, but there was no wind inside the house. The windows were always closed. Then came the shadows. She would walk past mirrors and see something move behind her, just for a second, just at the corner of her eye. When she turned around, nothing was there. Empty hallways. Silence. And then the sounds. Late at night, when Richard was asleep and the house was supposed to be quiet, Elena would hear it. A soft humming like a lullaby, coming from a nursery upstairs. The nursery they never used. The nursery that had been empty since they moved in 3 years ago. She asked Richard about it once. "Do you ever hear singing at night?" He looked at her like she was crazy. "Singing? Elena, you're stressed. Maybe you should see a doctor. Get some sleeping pills." But Elena didn't need pills. She needed answers. The maids had tried to tell her. The first one quit after 2 weeks. "I can't stay here, ma'am," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "The nursery. Something's in there. I heard crying. I heard a woman's voice." The second maid lasted only 3 days. "I saw her," she said, trembling. "In the mirror, a woman with burns on her face. She was staring at me." The third maid refused to speak at all. She just packed her bags and left in the middle of the night. The fourth maid was braver. She stayed a whole month, but one morning, Elena found her in the kitchen, pale and shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "Last night, I walked past the nursery. The door was open. I looked inside and I saw Mr. Richard standing there, talking to someone, but there was no one else in the room. He was talking to the air, ma'am, talking and smiling like someone was really there." Elena felt ice in her stomach. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," the maid whispered. "And when I stepped closer, he turned and looked right through me, like I wasn't even there. Then the door slammed shut. I didn't open it. It just slammed." Now the fifth maid was gone too, and Elena couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was haunting her house. Something was hiding in the shadows. And somehow it was connected to Richard. That night, after Richard fell asleep, Elena sat in the library with her laptop. Her hands shook as she typed. Hidden cameras for home. She didn't want to spy on her husband. She loved him, but love wasn't enough anymore. She needed to see the truth. She needed to know what was happening in her own house while she slept. The cameras arrived 3 days later. Small, tiny cameras that looked like normal objects. One was disguised as a book on the shelf. One was hidden inside a lamp. One was built into a picture frame. And one, the most important one, was placed on the edge of the nursery crib, pointing at the room. Elena installed them herself while Richard was at work. She wore gloves so she wouldn't leave fingerprints. She checked each angle twice. The cameras would record everything day and night and send the videos straight to her phone. "What are you doing?" Richard's voice made her jump. She spun around. He was standing in the nursery doorway, watching her with curious eyes. I was just cleaning," Elena said quickly, her heart racing. "The room gets so dusty." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We don't even use this room, darling. Why do you spend so much time in here?" I like to keep it nice," Elena said, "in case we ever, have children." Richard's smile faded. For just a moment, something dark passed across his face. Something sad and angry and far away. Then it was gone. "Of course," he said softly. "One day." He left. Elena waited until she heard his footsteps fade down the hall. Then she finished setting up the last camera and activated the system on her phone. The red light blinked. Recording. Now, all she had to do was wait. And watch. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed next to Richard, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe. The house was silent. Too silent. She pulled out her phone under the blanket and opened the camera app. For screens glowed in the darkness. Living room, kitchen, hallway, nursery. Everything looked normal. Empty rooms, dark corners, nothing moving. Elena watched until her eyes burned. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Still nothing. Maybe she really was going crazy. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe it was all in her head. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., the nursery camera flickered. Elena sat up fast, her heart hammering. She brought the phone closer to her face. The nursery door was opening, slowly, by itself, and from somewhere inside the room, soft and sweet and impossible, came the sound of a woman singing a lullaby. Elena's blood turned to ice. The camera never blinked. The recording never stopped. And Elena finally understood. She was about to discover a truth that would destroy everything she thought she knew. Elena's hands shook so badly she almost dropped her phone. The nursery door on the camera screen was now fully open. The darkness inside looked thick, like black water. And the lullaby continued, soft and sweet, floating through the empty room. Rockabye baby on the treetop. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Richard sleeping next to her. He hadn't moved. His breathing was deep and steady. He couldn't hear it. Somehow, only the camera was picking up the sound. She watched the screen, unable to blink, unable to breathe. Then something moved in the nursery. A shadow, darker than the rest, glided across the floor. It moved like smoke, like a person walking, but without footsteps. It drifted to the crib and stopped. The lullaby grew louder. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to run, but she couldn't move. She just stared at the screen, watching the shadows stand beside the empty crib, swaying gently, as if rocking a baby that wasn't there. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The shadow vanished. The lullaby ended. The nursery was empty and dark again. Elena didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, Richard acted like nothing had happened. He ate his breakfast, read his newspaper, kissed Elena on the cheek before leaving for work. "You look tired, darling," he said. "Maybe you should rest a day." Elena just nodded. She couldn't tell him what she'd seen. Not yet. She needed more proof. She needed to understand what was happening. For 3 days, Elena watched the cameras constantly. During the day, everything seemed normal. Sunlight filled the rooms. Birds sang outside. The house looked like a dream, beautiful, peaceful, perfect. But at night, the mansion changed. Every night at 2:47 a.m., the nursery door would open. Every night, the lullaby would play. And every night, the shadow would appear, drifting to the crib, swaying, humming, caring for a child that didn't exist. Elena recorded everything. She saved every video. But she told no one. Not Richard. Not her friends. No one would believe her. She barely believed it herself. Then came the 4th night. The night everything changed. Elena was watching the nursery camera, as usual, waiting for 2:47 a.m. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen, but she couldn't look away. 2:47 a.m. arrived. The door opened. The lullaby began. But this time, something was different. This time, the shadow wasn't alone. Elena gasped and sat up straighter. On the screen, two figures appeared in the nursery. Two shapes, both moving, both real. One was a shadow, the dark, smoky shape she'd seen before. The other was Richard. Her husband stood in the middle of the nursery, wearing his pajamas, his face lit by the moonlight coming through the window. But he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at the shadow, and he was smiling. "I know," Richard said softly. His voice came through the camera speaker, clear and gentle. "I know you're here. I've always known." The shadow moved closer to him. It reached out. Elena could see it now, a woman's hand, thin and pale, stretching toward Richard's face. "I am sorry," Richard whispered. His voice cracked. Tears ran down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I should have saved you. I should have been there." Elena's heart hammered. Who was he talking to? What was happening? Then the shadow stepped into a beam of moonlight, and Elena saw her face. It was a woman, young, beautiful, with long dark hair and sad, hollow eyes. But her skin was covered in burn marks. Scars ran down her neck, across her arms, twisting her features into something both lovely and terrible. The burned woman smiled at Richard. She touched his cheek with her scarred hand, and Richard closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man dying of thirst finally finding water. "I never stopped loving you," Richard said. "I built this house for you. Everything here is for you, so you have a place to stay, so you wouldn't be alone." Elena's phone slipped from her hands onto the bed. Her whole body felt numb, cold, frozen. Richard wasn't haunted by a ghost. He was with her. He wanted her there. The burned woman leaned close to Richard and whispered something Elena couldn't hear. Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know," he said, "but I can't leave. Not yet. She need me too." Elena realized with horror that he was talking about her. The burned woman stepped back. Her sad eyes turned toward the camera, toward Elena, somehow knowing she was watching. And for just a moment, their eyes met across the impossible distance between life and death. Then the woman faded like mist in sunlight. Gone. Richard stood alone in the nursery. He wiped his tears, took a deep breath, and walked out of the room, closing the door gently behind him. Elena sat in bed, shaking, her mind racing. She heard Richard's footsteps in the hallway. He was coming back to their bedroom, back to her, back to the life they were supposed to share. She pretended to be asleep. When he slid into bed beside her, he kissed her forehead softly. "I love you," he whispered. But Elena didn't believe him anymore. The next morning, while Richard was at work, Elena tore through his office like a storm. She pulled open drawers, rifled through files, searched through old boxes in the closet. There had to be something, some clue, some explanation. And then she found it. At the bottom of a locked drawer, she'd broken a lock with a letter opener, was a newspaper clipping. Old, yellowed, dated 7 years ago. The headline read, "Local woman dies in house fire." Elena's hands trembled as she read. Victoria Marsh, 28, died yesterday when a fire consumed her family home on Riverside Lane. Investigators say the fire started in the kitchen and spread rapidly. Ms. Marsh was trapped on the second floor. Her fiancé, Richard Castellano, was away on business at the time. He could not be reached for comment. There was a photo, a young woman with dark hair and a bright smile. The same woman Elena had seen on the camera. The burned woman, Victoria, Richard's first fiancée. Elena's stomach twisted. She kept reading, finding more articles, more clues. The fire had been ruled an accident, but some neighbors had whispered about Richard, how he'd been acting strange before the fire, how he and Victoria had been fighting, how he left town the very night it happened. And then, 2 years after Victoria's death, Richard had built this mansion, right here, on the exact spot where Victoria's house had burned down. He'd built their home on her grave. Elena's coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. She didn't notice. She just stood there, surrounded by broken pieces, staring at Victoria's photograph. Ngang. Elena spuna ruined. Old Margaret stood in the doorway. The only maid who had stayed longer than a month, an elderly woman who had worked for Richard even before Elena arrived. Margaret, Elena Brited, did you know about this? About Victoria? Margaret's wrinkled face was sad. She nodded slowly. I tried to warn you, ma'am, but Mr. Richard said I'd be fired if I spoke of it. Tell me now, Elena demanded. Tell me everything. Margaret stepped into the room and closed the door. Her voice was barely a whisper. He loved her, ma'am. Loved her more than life itself. When she died in that fire, something in him broke. He blamed himself, said if he'd been there, he could have saved her. So he built this mansion, exactly where her house stood, thinking it would bring her back somehow. And did it? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. Margaret nodded. She came back, ma'am. 3 years ago, right after the mansion was finished. I saw her first, in the mirrors in the nursery, walking the halls at night. Mr. Richard sees her too. He talks to her. Margaret's voice broke. He never let her go. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Margaret asked sadly. Would anyone? Elena had no answer. That night, Elena didn't pretend to sleep. She sat up in bed, phone in hand, watching the nursery camera, waiting. 2:47 a.m. came. The door opened. The lullaby played. Victoria appeared. And this time, Elena got out of bed. She walked down the dark hallway, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor. She walked to the nursery. The door was open, glowing with soft moonlight. Inside, Richard stood with his arms around Victoria's ghost, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. And Victoria was looking directly at Elena, her burned face sad and knowing, as if to say, he was mine first. He will always be mine. Elena understood then. She understood everything. This wasn't her home. It never had been. This was Victoria's house. Victoria's love. Victoria's eternal prison. And Richard would never, ever leave. Elena stood frozen in the nursery doorway, watching her husband hold a ghost. The moonlight made everything look like a dream or a nightmare. Richard's arms were wrapped around empty air, but Elena could see Victoria there, as clear as day, her burned face pressed against his chest. Victoria's eyes met Elena's, and in that moment, Elena saw something she didn't expect. Not anger, not hatred, just sadness, deep, endless sadness. Richard, Elena whispered. He jumped and spun around, his face going white. Victoria vanished like smoke. The nursery was suddenly empty except for the two of them. Elena, Richard, Vited, how long have you been standing there? Long enough, Elena said. Her voice was steady, but inside she was breaking into 1,000 pieces. I know about Victoria. I know about the fire. I know about everything. Richard's shoulders slumped. He looked suddenly old, tired, defeated. How did you find out? The cameras, Elena said. I installed cameras. I saw you with her. I saw everything. Richard closed his eyes. A tear rolled down his cheek. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. For what? Elena asked. For lying to me? For building our home on top of her grave? For loving a ghost more than you love me? I do love you, Richard said quickly, desperately. Elena, I love you so much. You have to believe that. But you love her more, Elena said. It wasn't a question. It was a fact, a truth she'd been running from for 3 years. Richard opened his mouth to deny it, but the words died on his lips. He couldn't lie anymore. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know how to stop. She was my everything. When she died, when I couldn't save her, I died too. Part of me died with her in that fire. And you built this house to bring her back, Elena said. Richard nodded. I thought if I built it exactly where her house stood, if I made it beautiful enough, perfect enough, maybe she'd come home. And she did. 3 years ago, The night we moved in, I saw her for the first time, standing in the nursery, smiling at me, and I felt alive again. Elena felt her heart crack. What about me, Richard? What about our life together? Was any of it real? All of it was real, Richard said, taking a step toward her. I married you because I loved you, because I thought maybe I could move on, be happy again. And I was happy, Elena. You made me happy. But then Victoria came back, and I couldn't send her away. I couldn't lose her twice. So you kept us both, Elena said bitterly. A wife in the day and a ghost at night. Richard looked down at his hands. I know it's wrong. I know it's insane. But I can't let her go. I've tried, Elena. I've tried so hard. But she's stuck here. She can't move on. She's trapped in this house. Trapped in the fire. Trapped in the moment she died. And I'm the only one who can see her. The only one who can comfort her. Elena felt a strange mix of anger and pity. That's not love, Richard. That's guilt. You're not holding on to her because you love her. You're holding on because you think her death was your fault. It was my fault. Richard shouted suddenly, his voice breaking. I was supposed to be there that night. We'd had a fight about me traveling too much for work. She asked me to stay home, but I left anyway. I chose my job over her. And while I was gone, she died. Alone. Scared. Burning. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, sobbing. I killed her, Elena. I killed the woman I loved. Elena wanted to stay angry. She wanted to hate him. But watching him break down, she felt something else. Understanding. Terrible, painful understanding. She walked to him slowly and knelt beside him. Richard, listen to me. You didn't kill her. It was an accident. Un horrible, tragique accident. But it wasn't your fault. Then why won't you leave? Richard whispered. Why is she still here? Because you won't let her go, Elena said softly. Your guilt is keeping her trapped. She can't move on because you won't forgive yourself. Richard looked up at her, his eyes red and swollen. How do I do that? How do I let her go? Elena took a deep breath. You tell her the truth. You tell her goodbye. And you mean it. That night, at 2:47 a.m., all three of them stood in the nursery. Elena had never seen Victoria this clearly before. She stood beside the crib, her burned face illuminated by moonlight, watching them with ancient, tired eyes. Victoria, Richard said, his voice shaking. I need to say goodbye. Victoria tilted her head, like she was listening to music only she could hear. I loved you, Richard continued. I will always love you. You were my first love, my first everything. But I can't keep you here anymore. I can't keep us both trapped in the past. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to Elena. And it's not fair to me. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted, softened. The fire wasn't your fault, Richard said, tears streaming down his face. And it wasn't mine either. It was just a terrible accident. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. But I can't change the past. I can't bring you back. And holding on to you is killing me. He took a deep breath. So I'm letting you go now. I'm releasing you. Go to the light, Victoria. Go find peace. Find happiness. Find whatever comes next. You don't have to stay here anymore. For a long moment, nothing happened. Victoria stood perfectly still, staring at Richard. Then, slowly she smiled. A real smile, warm and beautiful. The smile of the woman she'd been before the fire. She reached out and touched Richard's cheek one last time. And then she turned to Elena. Victoria's eyes met hers, and Elena understood. This ghost wasn't her enemy. She wasn't a monster. She was just a woman who had loved and lost and gotten stuck in between. Just like Richard. Just like Elena herself. Victoria mouthed two words. Thank you. Then she faded. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just gently, like morning mist under the sun. One moment she was there, the next she was gone. The nursery felt different immediately. Warmer, lighter, empty in a good way, like a room that had finally been cleaned after years of dust. Richard collapsed against Elena, sobbing. She held him, crying too, mourning the woman they both lost in different ways. Elena didn't leave that night. She didn't leave the next day either. But she also didn't stay forever. Over the following weeks, she and Richard talked, really talked, about Victoria, about the fire, about guilt and love, and all the ways people hurt each other, without meaning to. They went to therapy together. They worked through the pain. Slowly, the mansion began to feel like a home instead of a tomb. The maids stopped quitting. The doors stopped opening on their own. The lullabies ceased. Victoria was finally at peace. And so the house was too. But some things couldn't be repaired. Some cracks went too deep. 6 months later, Elena moved out. Not in anger, not in hatred, but in understanding. She loved Richard, but she also loved herself. And she couldn't build a life with a man who had spent so long building monuments to death. Will you be okay? Richard asked on her last day, helping her carry boxes to her car. Elena looked back at the mansion, the golden chandeliers, the marble floors, all the wealth and beauty that had hidden so much pain. Yes, she said honestly, I think I will be. Richard nodded. Thank you, Elena, for everything, for seeing her, for understanding, for setting us both free. Elena smiled sadly. We all deserve to be free. She drove away from the mansion and didn't look back. In her rear-view mirror, Richard stood alone on the steps, waving goodbye. He looked smaller somehow, lonelier, but also lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Elena didn't know what would happen to him. She didn't know if he'd find love again, or if he'd spend the rest of his life alone in that beautiful, haunted house. She hoped he'd find peace. She hoped he'd find joy. But mostly, she hoped he'd finally learn what she had. That real love isn't about holding on to ghosts. It's about letting go when it's time. It's about choosing life over death, truth over comfort, and yourself over a beautiful lie. The cameras were gone now, dismantled and thrown away. Elena didn't need them anymore. She'd seen enough. She'd learned enough. And as she drove toward the city, toward her new apartment, toward the uncertain but hopeful future, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Real, honest, and perfect freedom. And it was more beautiful than any mansion could ever be. What did you think of this story? Did it give you chills? If this tale of love, loss, and letting go touched your heart, like this story to show your support. Share it with someone who loves supernatural mysteries and emotional journeys. And don't forget to subscribe for more spine-tingling stories that will keep you up at night. What would you do if you discovered your home was built on a grave? Leave a comment below. See you in the next story, if you dare.